Hello, and welcome to another fully live Friday episode of Hacking with Friends. My name is Cody Kinsey. I am a security researcher at Varonis, and today we have our cryptozoology expert, Michael, on for another round. And I've really found that, we go really out of our way to bring you guys the best cryptozoology expert within at least 5 or 10 miles. And
Indeed.
we've gotten very few questions about cryptozoology in our previous chat. So I just want to encourage you, if you're shy, if you have a question about cryptozoology, which again is not cryptocurrency or cryptography, it is a study of legendary animals, then please direct those questions to Michael, because he's really been getting not very much love on the channel.
I'm glad you finally respect them properly. Legendary.
Some might say imaginary or symptomatic of an underlying condition, but others would call them legendary animals, such as the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
The Squatch.
Chupacabra.
So, never mind. We have so much to cover. I was going to ask if the Squatch and Bigfoot are the same thing or different, but I believe they're different, right?
They're separate species.
Yeah, okay, cool. So,
I mean,
there you go. Start out with the
anyone
fact.
knows that.
Yeah, but if you have any hacker questions while we're going on, we are going to go through the news today, a bunch of things you should be aware of, and a couple interesting tools that I found. But if you have any questions, we are here live, and we're happy to take a look at them and answer them as we go. So we have some stuff to cover, but I also want to talk about some of the things that I've been covering on the last couple streams, which have been using the ESP8266 and the ESP32. I have one right here. And these little microcontrollers can do tons of stuff. And many people don't realize how easy it is to get started with getting them to essentially do new tricks. Last time we demonstrated how you can create a fake FTP server and attack it. And we wanted to maybe take the next step with some of the suggestions we got from the channel, which was, can you do other services? So it's really cool to be able to set one of these up as a service to attack. And while FTP and Telnet are relatively easy to do, I wanted to see if, for example, there were some other things that you could implement on this, which led me to this. So if you just Google around a little bit or look on GitHub, you can usually find some projects that are currently maintained and have really interesting potential. So in this case, I was like, I wonder if you could create like a fake SSH server on a little microcontroller.
I think that would be one of the coolest.
Yeah, of course, here's some questions. SSH into what?
It doesn't matter. You just need to get them to attempt to brute force it, and then you can recognize that someone's compromised your system or doing something wrong.
Right. But all the protocols need to work as though it was logging into something. And obviously, there's not a Linux system running on this little ESP32. So on
you
some
could
level,
lie and say there was.
Programmatically, how would you do that?
I don't know.
Yeah. So
I don't program
you can see the
things.
problem here. I thought hey, it would be really cool to have SSH on the ESP32, but I was like, wait, SSH into what? But somebody has actually gone and done the damn thing. So I'm going to be trying this out over the next week or so. I've actually been working on the example code that's included, and it looks like, upon actually looking at it, oh wait, that's the approximate library, where you can tell if devices are nearby via Wi-Fi, which is really cool. But this is the SSH library I found. You put in your Wi-Fi network name and password, and then you put in the username and password for the SSH server, and apparently this little sucker will run an SSH server on a ESP32. SSH
cool.
into what? I guess we'll find out, huh?
So we could do that for one of the upcoming live streams then.
If it works. But
works.
I just want to show you guys, if you have a little microcontroller lying around and you want to know what kind of stuff is available for it, I find it's really easy to get started if you just go to Arduino, File, and of course make sure you have the board you want to play with selected, but then go to File, Examples, and you can just find all these example programs that are already written for you. In this case, I could find the SSH one right here. I've also found there's lots of really interesting Wi-Fi ones that are available.
Wait, maybe I missed something. You're saying this is natively included in Arduino?
In Arduino, yeah. So if you want to do something, if you want to play with an ESP32 and you want to do something like Wi-Fi related, there's like an ESP32 Wi-Fi library that has a bunch of different, here we go, Wi-Fi, a bunch of Wi-Fi scan, Wi-Fi multi, which lets you join multiple Wi-Fi networks,
That's pretty
WPS,
cool.
this allows you to do all sorts of things pre-written, and all you need to do is basically fill in the blanks. So if you're a total beginner, or if you know a tiny bit of programming, this is how I got started on a lot of projects. I'll just take an example library and start modifying it a little bit until I break it, and then go back a little bit, see what I did. And there have been a lot of really cool one-off examples I've made just by doing this. So if you're a beginner and you want to find out how to do more fun stuff like this, or if you've enjoyed some of our previous streams on this sort of thing, then this is an easy way that you can get started doing it.
Yeah. Oh, we did have one question for you. Where was it? Have you ever tried attaching a Raspberry Pi on a drone to mess with the Wi-Fi?
Yes, I have. They're heavy. So it depends on what kind of drone you're talking about. So a Raspberry Pi, usually it would be like a Raspberry Pi 0W, and you need to wire it into power. So that's another potential source of weight. So those two things can really, really drag down whatever drone you're working with, depending on the size of it. If it's a larger drone, then it can probably handle it. I don't have a lot of larger drones. I did at one point have some D1 minis, just like this, and I had these weird little, like, monocopters that were just a ball. They were painted like Angry Birds, but you might have seen them. They were in like the dollar store and stuff like that, where they're these little helicopters that hover, and they have a sensor in the bottom that can detect when they get really low, and then they bounce back up. So they just kind of maintain their altitude, and they're for kids or whatever to like marvel at. But if you take it apart, if you take the ball off, it's just this little helicopter with like two blades that go in opposing directions. And it when you take the weight of the ball off, it suddenly will just shoot up like a rocket. And like, I didn't know this. And the first time I took it apart, because we interviewed someone at the Hackaday SuperCon who's like, go to the dollar store and buy electronics, take them apart and look at the stuff inside. Because it's like, it's always worth way more than $1 because the stuff has been dumped. And it's usually worth like $50 or more. So I started doing this, and I was just amazed to see this like series of like motors and gears and stuff inside with a little sensor. And when I took it apart and let it fly for the first time, it rocketed away and we lost it. It just flew like maybe 2 miles away before it finally died and fell down. We're like, wait a minute, like this is cool. So I attached a D1 Mini and had it start sending out a bunch of beacon frames. So it was creating like a bunch of Wi-Fi networks that would cause people's devices to try to connect to it. And then we just, I plugged it directly into the power because it had a LiPo battery, and it didn't fry itself, it worked. The motor didn't run quite as fast, but it didn't really matter because we had the plastic siding off, and it just flew. Like it gained a little bit of altitude, but it would fly like pretty regularly, just spamming Wi-Fi network names. So it wasn't a Raspberry Pi, but I have mounted a D1 Mini to a drone and confirmed that it was able to send out beacon frames and do Wi-Fi hacking stuff. So yes, I have attached a Wi-Fi hacking tool to a drone, but it was not a Raspberry Pi. It was a dollar store drone and a D1 Mini.
Oh yeah, that thing was tiny too.
It was awesome. It was really cool. So if you've never gone to the Dollar Tree and just looked at the electronics there, like I highly recommend that you do so, because some of the stuff when you take it apart is actually super cool and can be repurposed for other interesting things like those drones.
Awesome. And then who was it? Oh yeah. Let me switch to my screen. Sorry, I'm answering a question.
Go for it.
Okay, Victor was asking about ADSB stuff. So you do need...
Enlarge?
Oh, yes. Command +++.
There we go.
So he was asking about adding 978 megahertz. For those that don't know, 1090 is the main frequency. That's usually used by the big commercial boys. But 978 is used by the smaller, like Cessnas and stuff like that. So if you do want to add that, you will need 2 dongles to receive both 1090 and 978 at the same time. There's a little article piece here that you can read. I don't think the orange one will do 978, so you would need a separate one for that. But like any standard SDR will do it. The FlightAware one is nice just because it has like the built-in filter and stuff. But yeah, okay. Onward and upward.
Cool. So we have a couple things that were sent in by Zam this week. One of them is the damn vulnerable bank. So if we switch over to my screen, there we go. We're going to teach you guys how to hack into a bank. I'm sure
that's crazy that this exists.
I'm sure that won't get us taken off the stream.
Yeah.
No. Okay. So this isn't a real bank. This is a banking application that you can download that is vulnerable, that kind of demonstrates how severe these sorts of vulnerabilities can be by providing just a context is really serious, banking, people's money. So you can learn how to break into this. You can learn how to do some really interesting stuff. And if you want to see the beginnings of how this sort of stuff works, we also have a piece of content that came out on Hack 5 that we produced with our friend Nick this week, which was the second part of his Android Studio, using Android Studio to learn Android app security. So in this, he goes through and demonstrates how to take a vulnerable application and actually do the steps necessary to find really common vulnerabilities. So if you want to do something like get started with one of these vulnerable applications, then you might want to go and look at how this sort of thing works with an Android app, because they're very similar, and you'll find a lot of the same problems in web applications as well. So thank you to Zam for sending this in. And if you, again, want to get started with this, then do check out the damn vulnerable bank, because I think that people really understand vulnerabilities a lot more when money is at stake, and this is a great way to kind of showcase where you might find these in a way that could really affect a bunch of people's money.
I think that is the scary thing. Especially, I always think about like those smaller community banks who have these like sort of wonky websites. I'm always like, is your website really that secure to handle my money and my transactions and stuff? I don't know.
Yeah, so because this is an Android application, I actually just confirmed that. I wasn't sure if it was both or just one, but because it is an Android application, you can probably follow the steps that Nick is laying out here in part 1 and part 2 on Hack 5. So if you haven't already checked out that video, go ahead and do so, and feel free to ask questions on the video here as well. But yeah, so really good series. If you're interested in bug bounties, if you're interested in getting into application security, this makes it super easy because Nick really likes this stuff, and it's easy to tell when he's explaining how cool he thinks this is and how fun he thinks it is. So if you enjoy poking around and find vulnerabilities and like to maybe make some money on the side doing this with the bug bounty, then this is a great way to get started. So also sent in by Zam, this characterization of the current ransomware attacks as the ransomware pandemic.
I need to include this article in my news piece.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are happening now that are obviously focusing in a lot of attention on ransomware, but I don't know if I would call it a pandemic.
I mean,
is it too soon?
I think. I see. I mean, I do kind of think it is its own pandemic of sorts, because I do think there is a lot of low-hanging fruit, as it were, out there that these people can just target, especially with ransomware as a service, when they don't even need to design it. They just need to find, vulnerabilities and like mass scan people and stuff. And then also, actually, let me switch to, there was an article that I was going to talk about referencing how phishing... phishing continues to be one of the most common ways to actually get ransomware on a system. And one of the little interesting statistics I found, I think it was down here, is that 76% of victims had attackers take over their system within 12 hours. So, that's a pretty small time to recognize that someone's compromised your system and shut it down, right?
12 hours isn't much time from initially getting an alert to having everything be taken away from you. So that's it's funny to me that the top statistic on this was that 65% of companies that reported that they had been broken in via phishing also reported that they had done phishing training for their employees that apparently didn't work very well.
I'm gonna switch back to your screen. I think that phishing, just don't click on links, people.
Are you the only person in the world whose job doesn't require you to click on links?
I understand, but I do think we need to find a better system to identify and prevent phishing emails, whether that's scanning in the inbox somehow, or I'm assuming email isn't the only way people get phishing stuff, but probably the major way.
All right, so moving on. More SolarWinds stuff. There's a new critical SolarWinds 0-day vulnerability that's under limited attack, apparently. And it's worth noting that apparently this is a separate attack from the previous one that happened. It's not related to the previous supply chain attack. So that's
Not confusing at all.
Not confusing at all. So you can take a look for more information on this. They've released some indicators of compromise. It's not totally clear how many customers are affected. They haven't come back with those numbers. So this is still very much kind of a developing story. So we'll probably have more details about this next week because we still don't know who was hit by this or what exactly is going on. But you can see that there was a ServU version hotfix that apparently has corrected this issue. You can also see that this is the vulnerability that was exploited. So let's take a look at it. All right. So we have what's the severity? Is it going to tell us? It doesn't know? Critical, 9.0. Okay, well, that's not good.
That seems bad.
Remote code execution vulnerability in SolarWinds. Serving remote memory escape vulnerability. Okay, if exploited, a threat actor may be able to gain privileged access to the machine hosting ServU only. Okay, well, thank you for qualifying that. So, SolarWinds ServU managed file transfer and ServU secure FTP are affected by this vulnerability. Okay, so that's not, obviously, a 9.0 critical base score is not good, but it does look like this is not related to the other attack. We'll see what exactly this was used to do in the coming weeks, because all we know is that there was a vulnerability, this is what it could do, and that somebody was trying to take advantage of it. So I guess we will see next week, actually, who was hit by that and what happened. Michael, you got anything to say about Revel's ransomware gang?
Yeah, I was going to talk about this too. Yeah, it seems a little unclear right now if it's one of those things where it's like the water was getting too hot and they decided to bounce out as soon as they could, or if it was more along the lines of the US or Russia was like, hey, you got too high profile. We're going to do a targeted attack against you. But their stuff is no longer online. Let's just put it that way. Yeah, that's about all I had to say.
Yeah, so the U.S. Cyber Command offered a cryptic response.
Yeah.
They were like, so some journalists were like, hey, U.S. Cyber Command, did you get those guys? And they were just like, instead of being like, no comment, they were like, we have noted the disruption of their network and have no further statement at this time. And I was like, so you did it. So you guys did it, right? Like, why even say that? Like, if you guys didn't do it. Maybe like somebody finally got sly that they could just do that with like anything that seems good and like people would just attribute it to them. But the U.S., in my opinion, like U.S. Cyber, first of all, like they were the ones I think that shut down the last ransomware gang by just like, you know, in a coordinated strike, like taking down a bunch of their infrastructure and then taking over their like payment mechanism as well.
Because the payment website is down as well.
Yeah, so if they have gotten better at this, then like this seems like a pretty standard thing you would do if, you know, you have an out of the country target that is able to accept payments, do all this other stuff. Disrupting their infrastructure kind of seems like the first thing you would do if you were U.S. Cyber Command.
And it's important to note that it was both ClearNet websites and Darknet websites too that went down.
Yeah. So there's a lot of different theories about what happened, like whether they took it down themselves. I'm on the U.S. Cyber Command as being very dodgy. And like probably had something to do with it.
If we're doing the skeptical stuff, I also wouldn't be surprised if Russia or somewhere over there were like, hey, you got a little too high profile with this one. Yeah, shutting down like a gas pipeline is like a little bit more than most people would be cool with getting attention for. So yeah, like obviously there's lots of attention on this now. People are a little shook up that like this is actually affecting their day-to-day life when there's like gas shortages or potentially like meat shortages or like some of the other stuff. Are we confusing two attacks? Because wasn't that a separate group that did that one? Yes, it is. But I'm saying that the reason why people are shook up about this in general as a topic and why like a bunch of governments are getting more serious is that like the average citizen isn't affected by like an attack against like some random big company. But as soon as it starts affecting like meat, like like gas, like these are all like things that weren't previously something that a cyber criminal could really like shut down, or at least they weren't doing it on such a large scale. So now that normal people are being affected by this, like they're getting mad like when they're subjected to a shortage of something because somebody didn't protect what they were supposed to be protecting. So it's I actually don't have an article for this up, but do you have anything on the new cybersecurity task force or the I do. Give me just a second. So the president finally, actually, I was a little pessimistic before I had commented that, Biden and Putin had talked, and he was like, ransomware bad, don't do any more ransomware.
None of that.
And then it seemed like, a week ago, Biden was doing the same thing, and I was very pessimistic that there would be any action taken. It does seem, what's the word, committee, or is it task force? They did form a task force to crack down on ransomware. So they're going to be offering bounties now.
Like for their heads?
I don't think quite. Although I imagine there are bounties for anything that leads to the arrest, because that is certainly something we've seen in the past. Is these criminals being arrested, obviously. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see that there's action being taken. I would like to see more action, but this is definitely a good step in the right direction. And hopefully, this isn't one of those cases where they start a task force, give them a tiny bit of power, and say, "Oh, hey, look, we're working on the problem." Hopefully, they actually give the task force enough power to take tangible actions to curb. It does seem that the task force is very defensive-oriented right now, especially with some of the briefings they've given Congress members. And I certainly understand that, but I don't. Yeah, it's going to be hard to stop ransomware. Like it's going to be something that continues and continues to grow. So hopefully we can see better defenses, but also more actively taking down these ransomware groups before they can really get off the ground would be a good place to be in as well.
Yeah, so another thing that they did was they are trying to establish standards for two things: data sharing and critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
So critical infrastructure currently has no real necessities for having a certain level of cybersecurity. There's no mandate that they need to have a certain checklist of things done.
I find mind-boggling. That should be a requirement, right?
Right. So in this, they also went through and said, all right, we're going to be designating certain things as critical infrastructure, and we're going to be trying to mandate a certain checklist to make sure that at least the basics are covered here. And then they also want to be able to have better sharing. So one thing they were talking about in this as well was having requirements for reporting hacks to the government, so that you don't have 5 different companies all keeping the secret when more and more other companies are all getting hit and they're not sharing data and allowing anybody to respond in a coordinated fashion. A lot of these companies just kind of go into damage control mode and don't want a PR problem, but that is the exact opposite of what authorities need in order to stop an attack in progress and go after that infrastructure. So having a robust sharing mechanism, making sure that it's mandatory, making sure that critical infrastructure has certain basic checklist taken care of, those are all the things that they were kind of talking about, and actually I'm gonna say don't really seem like a bad idea. Like Michael said, it's going to be interesting to see how much power these committees actually have or what they're actually able to do. But it is good to see that certain things that are pretty surprising, like that critical infrastructure doesn't have certain standards for cybersecurity and in the wake of these attacks, are being taken care of or at least addressed. So hopefully we see more of that, and hopefully we do see some of these critical infrastructure companies be forced into compliance, because average everyday citizens are impacted when they are impacted. So being lazy or cheap about this sort of thing right now is not a good idea, because the rest of us tend to suffer for it, and it costs a lot of money to fix the problems when this sort of thing happens.
Yeah, I don't want to. Yeah, I was gonna say. I think also you can fall into victim blaming, but certainly some of these companies, or sectors in general, need to beef up their defenses regardless. If you went to a power plant in real life, you would expect a fence to be around it and some guards patrolling or something. And when these companies don't have the cyber equivalent of that, it seems they need to work on that, let's just say.
Yeah, so also Victor just offered to warp drive the gold line, and yes, I would love the PCAP file from that. That would be great. Especially, if you have GPS enabled for it, then absolutely, I would love that data. That would be great. All right, so let's go ahead and move on to the print nightmare. We're still
there. The forever nightmare.
But it looks like it's over. So now Windows has gone through and clarified that the last of their fixes has, in fact, addressed the problem, and that the only reports that they were receiving that looked like it could still be exploited involved well, the technical explanation is changing the default registry setting related to point and print to an insecure configuration. So basically they were going through and setting something to be like deliberately insecure, which is not the case or not the default way that things would be. So this would be a very, very limited impact, if at all. So I guess it's kind of the equivalent of like setting the Wi-Fi to like WEP. It's just like anybody can do that. So if you're doing a demo on how insecure
Make it an
Wi-Fi
open
is,
network.
but it requires on the Wi-Fi being set to WEP, then you might not actually have a valid attack chain. So that's kind of how I was understanding it. So yeah, it looks like this is finally done, but stay tuned. Somebody may find another way around it. It was just very interesting to see that the first couple patches did not actually take care of the core problem with this vulnerability. They just cut off some of the paths to the exploit. So people were able to just change the path a little bit and be able to get the exact same result after the first patch. So just interesting to see that even if you keep things fully patched, sometimes those patches aren't totally effective, and there will be a window of time where you're vulnerable until they roll out another one, which is what they had to do for the out-of-band patch they released.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about Wi-Fi. I love Wi-Fi vulnerabilities, and devices, in order to populate that list of nearby Wi-Fi networks, will constantly be scanning for a packet called a beacon frame. And these beacon frames have a bunch of different elements in them that include information about what you would need to do to join the network. It has the channel that the network is operating it on, it has the speed, and then there's a bunch of other stuff as well that allows you to, see enough information to know if the network requires a password or not, the type of security it's using, just all the different elements of the network that your phone needs to know in order to show it to you and then connect to it. So there was a vulnerability in Android devices that allowed them, when they were scanning, to have, let's see, what was it? What was the specific?
I think it was like a buffer overflow in the SSID or something.
No, it wasn't the SSID. It was in the information element.
Okay.
So what this is basically, I think, here's the technical explanation. During multiple SSID scan parse, there's a memory allocation. There we go.
Can you Command plus.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a memory allocation on variable of size 1024, which create a buffer overflow in utility gen if the length is greater than 1024. So this has to do with the information elements that are sent along here. If they're along a certain thing, if they're beyond a certain limit, then they cause a buffer overflow, which is really bad, especially because this affects any device that is on and scanning Wi-Fi networks. So there are several processes that will do this. So even if you turn your Wi-Fi off, your phone will actually continue to do this. So just turning your Wi-Fi off will not protect you from this vulnerability, which is pretty ridiculous. So yeah, it was very, very interesting to see another Wi-Fi based vulnerability. I can see that the CVEs affected here. You can take a look at if you want to learn more about it, but the severity on all of them is rated high, so that's not good.
Yeah, no bueno.
Yeah, so I just think it's very interesting that there are still vulnerabilities out there that totally remotely, from up to a mile away, can affect devices that are just on and scanning. This is the kind of stuff that's really difficult to defend against. So we saw the broad pwn vulnerability like years and years ago that was something somewhat similar, where just having a phone with a Broadcom wireless chip, which most phones around that time had a Broadcom wireless chip, that would allow you to like crash the wireless chip and then do a related series of other things to both the phone and the chip running inside of it. So it was really weird to just realize that even with the Wi-Fi off, there's no defense against this except airplane mode, which really doesn't make the phone very useful.
I was just going to say that that makes your phone a brick, basically.
Yeah, you can still play games on it, I guess, if they're fully downloaded. But for doing much of anything else, it just does not work. So yeah, paranoid people, I'm sorry, but these things keep happening, and I'm sorry to tell it to you, but the people who like wrap their phone in like a bag of chips or something, or like
like a Faraday cage.
Yeah, like they're really gonna be disappointed when they learn that there's another one of these out there.
They're like, okay, it stays in the Faraday bag for another month.
Yeah.
I did get information from a new source about the print nightmare. Apparently, it still affects the Zebra printers, which are commonly used in enterprise. They're the ones that do the shipping labels and receipts.
Oh, I know that. Yeah, I've worked in logistics. I know Zebra printers.
The patches don't work with those Zebra printers.
Huh.
So
So there's still like a subset
Yeah.
of products that are still vulnerable to this. All right. Well, I didn't know
Yeah.
that you. Obviously, we haven't validated this from like a
Yeah,
an
yeah,
actual news
it-
source, but from hearsay, that sounds still kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one that I thought was interesting. Michael, what do you use OBS for?
Well, what we're doing right now.
What we're doing right now? Well, guess what? You could be doing something much more interesting. You could be using it in a rat to record people's screens.
Ha! That's great. What?
Yeah. So
So they just use the built-in screen record or screen capture function. in
yeah.
a
So
rat?
basically, this remote access program was attacking Chinese gambling users. They were like going after like probably like illegal Chinese gambling sites.
That's one use of open source software.
Yeah. So also Trend Micro is saying that there's clues to link this to Chinese espionage group APT41, which is a very disappointingly non-creative name. I would expect something, like a angry beaver or something, but just like some cool
Cozy
name.
bear.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so I just think that it's pretty part of the course to be like attacking like gambling users or other people that are downloading proprietary software and running it. It's like not that hard to trick them into doing stuff.
I don't think that's that uncommon either, because I know that other programs that, like we've talked about before, living off the land. I know like TeamViewer and other programs like that have been used in the past because it's something that you can easily convince the person to download, or they'll already have on their system.
What? Okay, so this would fit into the group's modus operandi, since this group has been known to engage in cyber espionage operations during their regular work hours and carry out financially motivated attacks against gambling companies in Southeast Asia for personal profits. So they're
That's
just
wild.
like, what you guys do on your off time in other parts of Asia is not my business. You guys want to make an extra cool $1 million by ripping off gamblers in Indonesia? Just don't do it on work hours, all right, you rascals. Like, it's just like, are they going to get in trouble for that? Is that like against like espionage, like military company policy or whatever? I don't know. But it is really funny that these attacks continue to go out against users of websites that might be people are going to lose money either way. Like so going after gambling people like is a pretty safe bet that if you manage to exploit that, they're going to be doing things that involve their financial information. It seems like a pretty easy target for these people with access to a lot of resources to go after. So, seeing as this is like a off work like team building project for to like raise funds or whatever of this espionage group, it's it's just very.
That is one of the kind of like as interesting like areas of where there'll be like an illicit gambling site, and then they get like hacked or compromised, like. The illicit gambling site can't go to the authorities and be like, "Oh my God, we got hacked," because you basically be turning yourself in too. So it is an interesting era of internet that we live in.
That's so creepy. They're using OBS to record the screen. They're just like, you know what? This open source stuff works pretty good. Let's use it in our espionage attacks.
Yeah, no, literally to me that just sounds like someone was too lazy to program a screen recorder, so they're like, let's just grab this function out of OBS.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, wow, they're just like, wait, I didn't install OBS. Why is it open and running? Oh, well, it's back to my Chinese gambling game.
Okay.
All right, so, Michael, what is this?
It's a lot of, like, wiggly dots.
So, did you know that this was generated programmatically?
Oh, that's pretty cool.
It is extremely cool.
So just, like, a big, like, for while loop or something? Or, like...
I think it's a little more complicated than that. But so Etienne Jacob is one of my favorite like digital artists who uses code to create these incredible GIFs that are just absolutely wild.
That one's really pretty.
Yeah, he puts them on GitHub. So if you've ever been curious about the potential for digital art in code and stuff, hackers love digital art. And I have to say, some of the stuff he makes is absolutely the most soothing art that I've ever seen, which is why I subscribe to him.
I wonder if that would work
so
in
cool.
ASCII. Like, you could make animated ASCII art.
Yeah, I mean, sure. I'm sure you could convert it. But yeah, so some of these projects he'll document on GitHub, and you can actually go and see the code that's behind these animations. I just think it's super cool. Oh yeah, here it is. So if you want to go and see how some of these work, he even has tutorials and stuff. This isn't specifically hacker related, but if you've ever wanted to know how to do digital art like this, it's apparently not so hard. He has a complete
a whole tutorial on it.
Yeah, an entire tutorial.
What language is he using? That looks
yes.
like C or something.
Who knows? But yeah, so if you've ever been curious about how to make digital art that's this cool and crazy and mind-blowing, first, definitely follow him, and then second, check out his GitHub, because I didn't know you can make stuff like this with just code. But
honestly, I thought that was an optical illusion of some sort at first. I was like, is this one of those things where the dots aren't actually moving?
Yeah, like some of the stuff he does is absolutely wild, and I just like anytime I'm having a bad day, I'll just like look at one of these and just like have my brain like try to comprehend like what's going on. But what's so cool is most of these are like either mathematically derived or have mathematical formulas governing the way that they work. So like they work very, very much like physics and stuff. It almost looks like a physics simulator in some cases, but it's just mathematical properties that are being graphically represented in a really cool and interesting way.
Yeah, I know of several other artists who use fractals to make those kinds of patterns, and it gets really mesmerizing.
Yeah, so I always love to show these off because, like, some of these are just very, very relaxing to people who have anxiety, and like this one in particular. So if you like this sort of stuff, definitely check it out. It's one of my favorite accounts. All right, back to cybersecurity.
Yeah.
So this is one of the most interesting releases I saw all week. A very intense news release by Microsoft. So
okay.
What is going on with this? Why do this?
That's electrically opaque.
Yes, I'm aware of that, but what a weird flex. Like, congratulations on having that. It's very expensive. Like, what are you doing? Oh, so it's like showing the
forensics lab and then
all right,
hiding it.
So one big problem that I've always pointed out is if I am a security researcher and I find a vulnerability in something that's widely affects, let's say, smartphones, then I can either be a good guy and go over to a bug bounty program like BugCrowd or Hackeroni and turn it in and make some money, or I can go to some sketchy private business and I can sell that exploit, have them weaponize it, and then make a bunch of money. So if I don't care that it's used against journalists and dissidents and people that are targeted by governments of oppressive regimes, then I've made a bunch of money and I don't care that I've caused harm in the world. But these are serious problems because these cyber weapons are sold to lots of different governments. They're sold to lots of different powerful, rich people who might want to use them for illegal reasons, might want to use them against their opponents. And this happens all the time because there's a thriving market. And Microsoft has come out and worked really hard here to try to disrupt some of this by receiving reports from Citizen Lab, which went through and found some malware that was affecting journalists and reported it to Microsoft, and they aggressively went through and patched as much as they possibly could to try to disable these weapons and the sort of mechanisms they use to propagate infected devices. So they basically rebuilt parts of Windows to try to make it more difficult by design for the methods these companies rely on to break into devices. Now, of course, these fixes need to roll out, so not everybody's going to install them. So, if somebody doesn't update their devices, then they might not actually be protected by this. But the fact that Microsoft has come out so strongly against this and actually named names, in this case, naming a specific, I believe they were an Israeli group that was similar to the NSO group. I think this is...
yeah.
Oh, here. Wait, they're in here somewhere. But yeah, so they've actually named the name of the company and a company called Candiru. So yeah, it's rare to see a vendor like Microsoft calling out a specific company and being like, these guys suck. This makes the whole world worse. We hate these guys. We don't want these guys to get into our business. So they're doing everything they can to basically shut them down and make it so it's difficult for their products to work. And hopefully they succeed because these people, in my opinion, generally make the world a worse place.
Yeah.
it's interesting because a lot of these groups are, at least these two groups that they were mentioning, are both based in Israel, and Israel is one of those countries that has a absolutely like massive like cyber industry. They have lots of extremely talented people. They're really excellent at selecting people from a young age who have talent in cybersecurity and putting them into various programs to get them trained up. So they have a lot of cyber talent there, and they're internationally known as a cybersecurity powerhouse. So the fact that, you know, some of these people, some of them might not be ethical, is kind of an inevitability when you have such a huge segment of the market that is just cybersecurity and cybersecurity individuals. So, you know, on the fringe of this, you have these sketchy groups that are now being called out by companies like Microsoft. So, yeah, it's pretty crazy that these companies have thrived for such a long time abusing Microsoft's products effectively to allow surveillance by powerful people.
Yeah, it is a little disgusting to me that they can just pay more in bounties than the legitimate companies can pay in bounties, and that they're able to use them for nefarious purposes. Like, yeah, just messed up society.
Yeah. And Microsoft is going out of their way to say, like, these weapons threaten human rights. And that's because there's evidence that these are actually used to target journalists and other people who, I mean, some of the really outrageous stuff going on with journalists being detained, or I think there was, you know, the case of someone who was like forced down in a plane that was flying over like a country that wanted to imprison them. Like, these are real threats against people, and enabling technological surveillance of them through these products is a real serious problem, because there's no legitimate defense against this sort of thing.
That would be a really spooky thing, actually, because I don't think a lot of people consider the countries they're flying over. They would only consider, like, hey, I'm originating in this country and I'm flying to this destination country. And they're not considering, hey, you know, does this country in between care about the news I'm reporting, or stuff like that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's if you didn't know that industry was a big deal, like the fact that Microsoft is reacting to it is now a clear sign that this is increasing in prevalence, and it's something that we are going to see for quite some time. So yeah, cyber weapons are here, they're real, and they affect people all over the world. And hopefully Microsoft will continue to step up these efforts to shut down the vulnerabilities and practices that the attackers use in order to go after their victims. Not a big fan of that industry, I have to say. So now some good old American news. A man in, I believe, I'm just going to guess Florida.
Okay.
Yep, okay, the Orlando Sentinel. Yeah, so this was Florida.
Florida man.
Shot down a drone. It might be stereotypical to say that I assume that a man shooting down a sheriff's drone is from Florida, but here I am correct. So as you can see in the photo, the man fired on this drone with a .22 caliber rifle, hit it in the battery, which
shotgun
caused...
or right? Never mind. Go ahead.
.22 caliber rifle.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So, like, took out a .22 caliber rifle, shot at the drone, and then hit the battery, which caused it to crash and catch on fire. So as you can see there, I was like, how did like a little tiny bullet do that much damage? But it actually set the drone on fire by piercing the LiPo battery and crashing the drone, and also started a fire on the roof of a structure.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so contrary to what most Americans feel in their hearts, it is not legal to shoot at drones that are over or near your property. So this guy is being charged with basically the same thing you would be charged with firing into an aircraft.
I was gonna say I was trying to look up the price, but that drone is like a $14,000 drone too. That's like,
yeah. That being said, you should, if you are the sheriff's department, maybe understand the feeling of 98% of Americans that if a drone's flying over your property, you have the right to shoot at it. And also, it's kind of difficult to declare a drone as being like a police drone versus just some drone that is on your property.
I mean, that does bring up an interesting question of like, when you own a piece of property, how far above that property does your airspace? I am not getting into that debate
with you. No, right. But let's just say that currently the regulations are such that, in spite of the way we might feel about shooting at a drone that's hovering over our property and not knowing who it belongs to, it is still a crime. So I have to say, God bless this man. He's got the right idea, and it's
Yeah.
a darn shame that he's been now criminally charged with like 6 different things.
Yeah.
Because do I think that if a big fat drone was like hovering low over my property and being all sketchy, if I
Right.
would think the right way to deal with it would be to exercise my God-given right to defend against these government birds, I'm not going to say what I would do, but you can probably infer it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. Apparently, you can't shoot at drones. What is America coming to anymore?
Yeah,
right?
well, I mean, it does bring up interesting questions too about like, police aircraft generally identify themselves with markings and stuff. Should like police drones also have to do the same? Because there would be no way for a person to distinguish this from some just random person flying a drone over their property,
Right.
which would be illegal as far as I understand.
No, it's not. So because the FAA still sees a drone as an aircraft, no matter how small it is, firing on a drone is still legally the same as firing on an aircraft.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's considered a vessel, and because of that, it is illegal to fire on it, even if it is over your property. Now, if you had some wacky net gun or a trained hawk, that's different.
So the act of firing on it is illegal, but
Yes.
also the act of a random person flying over your property is illegal.
Yeah,
I
but
think.
they don't cancel each other out. You can't.
Right,
you
right,
Can't,
I'm
like,
not saying-
commit like
I'm
a
not saying-
separate crime in response
Yeah.
to someone's like infraction. or
Well,
misdemeanor.
more, yeah, correct. That's what I'm saying. So the appropriate response in this situation, if you thought it was a random person flying a drone over your house, is to call
Release
the
the bird.
cops.
What?
To call the cops.
Release
and
the bird.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I see. Train an eagle.
Yes.
Okay.
So we went to a DEF CON talk. I was with you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we went to a DEF CON talk where like a bunch of dudes with their company's money went out and tried to buy the best anti-drone technology that was on the market. And what they reported is like most of the people they contacted were like, all right, we want to buy it. They were just like, okay, it's not ready. They're like, what do you mean it's not ready? It's like, oh, we're getting it ready for you. They're like, is this product done? Has anyone ordered this before? They're like, yes. Many have done so, and
Yeah.
it is almost ready, but not yet. So they found that like a lot of the products like, had never been ordered before, and then the ones that had been ordered were pretty limited in effectiveness. There was like a big wonky like net gun, and then there was
There's
like, another
a jammer
drone.
gun.
There was like a massive jammer gun. There was like a drone that would swoop in and attack the other drone, and then there were trained eagles, which were like raised from birth to hate drones. And would like learn how to like take them out while evading like the ferocious like
Propellers.
because like what if the bird gets cut up, right? Like that would
Yeah.
be horrible. So they found that over all the different solutions, the birds were like among the most effective, and it still cost like $100,000
Yeah, because you have to train up a raptor,
from
capture
birth.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I know jammers can be effective to some degree, but then also there's questionable legality around that as well, right? Because you have to have like FCC permission on the frequencies. Like you can't just randomly start jamming GPS signals and stuff like that. That would be highly illegal, but that's the sort of things you would need to do to compromise these drones. So you're in a
So
lose-lose
you're pretty much
situation.
left with like drone-to-drone combat, and what's the other one? Birds. Right?
Well, if you're a nation state or
You're-
police
you're not.
police entity, there
Yeah.
are laser systems and
Yeah,
air
but we
defense
just
systems.
right. But then you would also be able to just jam the signals if you're a nation state. So just do that.
Well, actually, it's surprising because a lot of nation states like Israel has the Iron Dome. They also have like cannons to shoot them down, and they're highly
Why would you
missing
fire
lasers.
$1 million missile to take out a $1,500 drone?
Well, usually in the nation states, what they're afraid of is these swarm attacks where you would launch multiple drones,
Yes.
say at a ship or a crowded stadium or something like that.
Yeah. Again, my question: why would you use the Iron Dome to take out a $1,500 drone?
Oh,
Each one of those missiles costs like $1 million.
It's like $20,000. Those are actually like the cheapest missiles you can do that. But yes, if you were using other missile systems, then certainly would get prohibitively expensive.
Okay. All right. So birds is what we're going.
Yes,
with.
birds.
Hawks.
Reusable air defense systems.
All right, that was exhausting. Moving on. Let's talk about a vulnerability that affects 12% of the websites on the internet. So,
Oh, no.
fortunately, Hackeroni was able to offer up a reward enough that attracted somebody to turn in a vulnerability that would allow them to basically take advantage of a flaw in one of Cloudflare's products that's a content delivery network. So because this is an extremely common content delivery network, it was really severe that somebody could basically arbitrarily execute commands from this current version of their CDN. So the CDN.js is a JavaScript/CSS library that's owned by Cloudflare, and as you can see, it's used by 12.7% of all websites on the internet. So this is just one of those examples of why bug bounty programs are so essential. If you don't have a way for people to, after finding something this serious, like make some money off of it, it's really tempting to go to one of these groups I just mentioned and instead use it as a way to attack a website or go after a victim. So yeah, damn, like 12% of all websites is a huge amount of all websites. So it's really amazing that this was reported properly, and I have to give a shout out to the security researcher here for doing the right thing.
Yeah.
What are you looking at?
Where are 3D printed eagles.
We are doing. I'm sorry. We are doing a stream. Like
I was going to respond to someone's comment.
I see. So that's all we have this time. I was going to show you guys some Kitpoint stuff.
I also have an article to show.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Sorry, Michael.
Sorry, I got distracted with birds aren't real. Okay.
That's such an old meme.
But yeah, so there is this really interesting article, or blog post, I guess it was recently. And this is a detailed account on reverse engineering firmware, specifically in the context of IP cameras. So if you're really interested in learning about hacking firmware and analyzing it for vulnerabilities, this is a really cool article, especially since it shows how the cameras were eventually upgraded to like encrypted firmware, but they were still able to use an older edition of the firmware to go in and scan for vulnerabilities and then apply those vulnerabilities to the newer firmware, and they worked in most cases. So if you're interested in firmware hacking and IP camera hacking, definitely check out this article. Okay, now we can sign off for reals.
Okay, so I think that's all we got for this week. Obviously, a lot of stuff happened. I was particularly thrilled by like Microsoft coming out and just breaking the infrastructure these groups use deliberately. I think it's great that they're going out of their way to smash cyber weapons that are being used against vulnerable people around the world. So yeah, very cool for them. I also thought it was great. Well, not great. I also thought it was very funny that in their like off work hours, like Chinese cyber spies are just like going after gamblers in like Indonesia.
Yeah.
Okay. Like, how is that not against your work policy?
I guess that's a way to use your skills, but yes, ethically dubious at best.
They're just like, job comes with perks where we don't ask what you do with the cyber weapons after the lights are off. Like, okay, I'm fine, I guess. So yeah, make sure to stay tuned for more news next week. We will see you guys on we're not doing the Wednesday stream, right? No Q&A next week? No. So you'll see us next time on Tuesday. And if you want to see more great content, make sure to check out the Varonis brand channel, where you will see the threat update with our sometimes co-host Killian going over how real companies are reacting to current threats. And yeah, I think also we're not totally sure about going to like DEF CON or Black Hat anymore. Like we were 100% like 2 weeks ago, and now with all the news
Delta
coming
variant.
out, we are like 50-50 at best. So we'll let you guys know if we still decide to go, but at this point we're probably not going to, is how we're kind of feeling about it. But yeah, so sorry about that. I know we mentioned we were going to be doing some stuff at the Black Hat booth, but it just seems like maybe we could wait. Maybe we could wait just a little bit longer, you know? We could wait.
And if we do go in-person, meetings would be somewhat limited.
Yeah. So, all right, everyone, stay safe. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.